Welcome to the Bare Metal Cyber CISM Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Risk identification and assessment are critical stages in managing information security, but unless organizations follow through with risk treatment and monitoring, those insights will fail to reduce exposure in any meaningful way. The purpose of risk treatment oversight is to ensure that risks are not only identified, but also addressed in a way that aligns with business priorities and the organization's risk appetite. It ensures that treatment decisions are formally documented, appropriately reviewed, and consistently implemented. Security leaders must supervise the execution of mitigation plans, track control deployment, and confirm that risk reduction actions are actually working. Oversight also creates accountability, helping confirm that risk owners follow through on assigned tasks and that outcomes are reviewed over time. Most importantly, risk treatment must be integrated into the broader governance and compliance ecosystem so that progress is visible to executive stakeholders and aligned with enterprise performance and assurance activities. Organizations generally have 4 treatment options when responding to identified risk. The first is to mitigate, meaning to reduce the likelihood or potential impact of the risk by applying technical, procedural, or administrative controls. The second option is to accept the risk formally within defined thresholds, based on business justification and within the organization's risk appetite. The third is to transfer the risk, shifting potential financial impact to a third party, usually via insurance policies, outsourcing, or contractual obligations. The fourth is to avoid the risk altogether by discontinuing, redesigning, or deferring the activity that introduces the risk. The selected strategy should be based on a combination of feasibility, cost-benefit analysis, and the organization's ability and willingness to absorb the remaining risk. In many cases, the appropriate option may involve a combination of strategies, for example, mitigating some aspects while transferring residual impact. Supervising the treatment planning process requires formal structure and oversight. Security leaders must ensure that treatment plans are documented thoroughly. This includes clear articulation of the actions to be taken, the timeline for completion, and the individual or team accountable for each step. Treatment plans must address root causes, not just symptoms. For example, fixing a firewall misconfiguration may address an immediate threat, but addressing the root cause may involve improving change management or review protocols. Treatment actions must be evaluated to confirm alignment with existing business processes, especially when changes may affect workflow, application behavior, or customer-facing services. Treatment steps must be reviewed and approved by governance bodies when required, particularly for major control changes or resource-intensive initiatives. Dependencies, such as staffing, budgeting, vendor involvement, or system downtime, must be identified early. Tracking those dependencies helps ensure that delays are anticipated and managed proactively. Once controls are selected as part of a treatment plan, their implementation must be validated. This begins by reviewing whether the control's design is aligned with the specific risk it was intended to address. The control's scope, such as affected systems, users, or processes, must be defined clearly. Implementation dates and responsible parties must be recorded and tracked. Testing is required to confirm that the control was not only implemented, but is also functioning as intended. For example, enabling a system log is not sufficient unless the logs are actively monitored and stored securely. Cross-referencing with audit results, vulnerability scans, or compliance assessments helps validate that treatment objectives were met. If deviations or partial implementations are discovered, the treatment plan must be updated and alternative actions must be documented. Continuous verification ensures that mitigation does not stop at documentation, but is verified in operational reality. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Not every risk can or should be mitigated. Sometimes the appropriate course of action is formal risk acceptance. To supervise this process, organizations must define clear thresholds and approval requirements for accepting risk. These thresholds should align with the enterprise risk appetite, board mandates, and any regulatory limitations. Accepted risks must be accompanied by documented business justification, expected duration, review frequency, and the responsible owner. This data should be stored in the enterprise risk register. Risk acceptance should never be permanent by default. Each case should include a scheduled reassessment date and define conditions under which acceptance should be re-evaluated. Security and governance leaders must monitor whether accepted risks remain valid over time. If conditions change, such as a system being reclassified as critical or a threat becoming more severe, the original acceptance decision may no longer apply. Expired or unowned risk acceptances must be escalated to governance bodies for review and disposition. For risks that are transferred, oversight focuses on verifying that the transfer is enforceable and effective. Contracts and service-level agreements must be reviewed to confirm that risk transfer clauses exist and that the other party is capable of assuming the intended burden. Examples include cyber liability insurance, indemnity clauses in supplier contracts, or managed service provider controls. The terms must align with the organization's policies, incident response plans, and reporting requirements. For instance, a vendor must notify the organization of security incidents within a specific time frame and follow designated escalation paths. Organizations must also monitor third-party compliance over time. Even if risk is transferred, the originating organization still bears responsibility for managing vendor relationships and reporting to regulators or customers. Any transferred risks that remain material should be included in dashboards and governance discussions. Risk transfer is not abandonment, it's a reallocation of responsibility that still requires supervision and follow-through. Continuous risk monitoring is the companion to treatment. Once risks are addressed, the organization must monitor conditions to ensure that mitigated risks stay within acceptable limits, and that new risks are identified as circumstances change. Dashboards, key risk indicators, and event feeds provide real-time visibility into control performance and risk exposure. Alerts should be configured to notify relevant teams when thresholds are exceeded, control failures occur, or the threat environment changes significantly. Recurring reviews must be scheduled for all significant risks, especially those that have been accepted, treated, or transferred. Monitoring tools must be calibrated to detect new or emerging risks that may impact current controls. Monitoring is not passive reporting. It is an active feedback loop that supports risk reassessment, continuous improvement, and strategic decision-making. It ensures that the organization can respond to risk in real time, rather than waiting for audit cycles or incident triggers. Risk monitoring must also be integrated with control testing and assurance activities. Vulnerability management, internal audits, red team exercises, and incident investigations all produce data relevant to risk management. This data must be used to validate whether mitigated risks remain in check. When incidents or near misses occur, affected risk entries must be reassessed. Continuous improvement requires that lessons from security testing and operational failures be applied directly to the risk management process. If new findings indicate that a control is insufficient, thresholds or escalation protocols must be revised. This may involve increasing the frequency of review, expanding control coverage, or adding additional stakeholders to the governance chain. Monitoring outcomes must inform risk treatment strategy updates, ensuring that feedback loops are real, timely, and connected to program performance. Transparent communication is key to ensuring that risk treatment stays aligned with governance. Security leaders must report the status of open risks, treatment progress, and unresolved exceptions to leadership and oversight bodies. Visual tools, such as dashboards, risk heat maps, and trend charts make it easier to highlight high-impact items, overdue treatments, or areas lacking clear ownership. Regular updates should be included in risk committee meetings, audit briefings, and strategic planning reviews. These updates must include both technical findings and business implications. For example, instead of stating that a control has a 60% coverage rate, explain how that affects service availability, customer trust, or compliance with contractual obligation. When risk is communicated in business language, stakeholders are more likely to take action, support investment, and prioritize remediation. Supervising risk treatment and monitoring also means evolving the process itself. Risk treatment strategies must be reassessed as business models, technologies, and threats evolve. New services, acquisitions, or regulatory changes may require different mitigation approaches or acceptance criteria. Automation and AI-based analytics can help improve the accuracy and timeliness of monitoring, especially in complex or fast-changing environments. Collaboration must improve across departments. Legal, risk, IT, compliance, and business operations must work together to ensure that treatment and monitoring are integrated with enterprise planning, procurement, and project management. Governance feedback should be used to refine workflows, update risk thresholds, and streamline escalations. Ultimately, organizations must build a culture where visibility, ownership, and accountability for risk are ongoing priorities. Supervising risk treatment is not about managing risk once. It's about managing it continuously and confidently as conditions evolve. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cyber SISM Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.